Peace, it's Farmer Courtney, and welcome to Healthy Trend or Dead End, where we ask the question, are popular ingredients helping or harming us? And we're going to cover 7 solutions that can help you find out as soon as possible, because there's nothing worse than spending time and money on things that don't benefit you in the end. Really quickly, what we're going to be covering today are uncommon sources of information and how to knit them all together into a system to help you assess things quickly. I am not here to tell you what to eat. I'm not qualified to do that. Each one of us is an individual. Our bodies have very specific needs at different times of life and health challenges. What I am called to do is to share these 7 tools that will equip you to assess the risks of healthy food trends anytime it comes across your scope of awareness. Like um, you'll be able to assess it really quickly by using these tools. This is a quick snapshot. These are the 7 sources of information, 7 filters or lenses that I run things through. And don't worry about taking, notes or anything. I have it all linked in a PDF down below where you can just, click and find out more information about each one, get the different tools that I highlight that they offer. But these are the, 7 filters that things go through mentally here. We're going to cover the Weston A. Price Foundation, Sally K. Norton on oxalate, which is a naturally occurring plant chemical, Environmental Working Group, or sometimes it's abbreviated EWG, cornucopia.org, Tamara Rubin over at Lead Safe Mama, Dr. Maxwell Nardi of Symptometry, and lastly, How to Eat to Live by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So here's just a quick visual, right, of how this works in reality when you are out in the world. So those 7 sources, I have a lens that their work has informed of how I'm able to view things. So when I'm making an assessment, for example, in this spinach smoothie with maybe almond milk and spinach, I am able to mentally run through, okay, well, source number 1 cautions against raw vegetables in excess. They caution against nuts due to PUFAs, which are in the oil profile that's in nuts and can cause inflammation. Sally K. Norton, which was source number 2, she educates heavily. She's very focused on oxalates because it is a blind spot in nutrition, complete blind spot. And source number 3 says that, spinach is very high in pesticide contamination. It's on the Dirty Dozen list, so you would want to buy it organic, and so on. So source number, 6 and 7 says don't don't eat spinach, like caution, caution. And so does source number 2, don't eat spinach. If you do, don't eat it raw, and don't be a habitual spinach eater. Conversely, say you're like, I don't care about that. Maybe chocolate is your thing. Mentally, source number 1 has caution, source number 2, source number 5, especially lead contamination, source number 6, cautions against chocolate. So that's just the real practical application for this. And I'm passionate about this because beyond babysitting, my first outside of the home job that I really loved was being essentially the helper girl at a little mom and pop natural food store. That's what I did. That's where I learned, everything that was going on in the food supply when I was in my teenage years. So my teenage rebellion period was learning how to cook organic vegan food from scratch and wanting to start a farm and to take on the mega food giants and pharmaceutical industrial complex. Like that was really what I became very anchored in, because back in the day the health food store was the connection, right? Like aside from a direct grower or farm, buying club kind of thing, to get food that was free from the contaminants in the dominant food system, you had to go to these little niche stores. And so that's where I worked, and wherever I traveled and lived, I would find the sources of the healthy food around. And so when we traveled, we would use phone books, if you remember those back in the day. Phone books and guidebooks, these are printed materials, and we would use paper maps, and we would, find our way to these little niche food places, these little oases, and occasionally even, a payphone would be needed to get there. This was long before you could just roll up to Chipotle or even find any semblance of organic food available at Walmart. Finding food with the least amount of harmful ingredients became a skill set of mine because it was absolutely essential. And due to the lack of options, I became an expert at organic tailgating, right? So, like, we always had a food bag, a cooler, thermoses and cups and knives and napkins and like a jar of soapy water so we could wash our hands. And it's been serious for me. Like, this is our way of life. Um, and so I've seen a lot of health trends come and go over the years. Many, many, many things have come on the scene and they've gone. And so right now I feel like we're like at this great critical point where we can really see them for what they are. We can really see them really clearly using these 7 sources of information to kind of orient us to be able to make a decision. So it's an exciting time, to be able to put this together. So I'm sharing this system of how I evaluate things because I just feel like there's a lot of clever marketing going on out there, and also this sort of lazy researching that is very dominated by emotions, pardon me. And so this creates trends, and they ride through social media of people just kind of repeating things. And so we're going to sort of sort facts from fiction, and ultimately be able to answer the question, is it a healthy trend or is it a dead end? So you ready? We're just gonna go through these really quick. So the Weston A. Price Foundation was a source of information that I was very offended by back in the day when I was 19, seriously vegan, very dedicated to the plant-based lifestyle before it was really called that. And it helped me reconcile eventually something that never made sense to me out of How to Eat to Live. And they really made the teaching settle on the best part very clear to me in the most humbling manner possible. And so, love them or hate them, the Weston A. Price Foundation has a very specific mission, and they've done their due diligence. Like, they really have a lot of hours logged, countless, educational resources that we can tap into to really understand traditional diets, growing, farming, and how to eat to live on a different level. They don't use that, but they definitely have a contrary message. And so, that's what I always really respected about them, regardless, was like, wow, they're really, really dedicated. But I didn't understand their assignment at all. And maybe you don't either. And so if you're ready to turn this off, like, this is just my plea, like, stick with me. I remember like not wanting to hear anything against plant-based diets or anything like that, like literally 17 years in the trenches of stubbornness and like super dedicated. I could make everything from like amazing sugar-free beautiful vegan birthday cakes to like the most amazing like barbecued tempeh or whatever. Like, I was super into it. We started a farm. We were so into like plant-based foods. Like, truly, I get it. But today, what I really didn't understand about the messaging of nutrition and all of the popular trending information is this narrow lens that nutrition is studied through. And we're going to get more into that in the further on in the presentation. But I was really misled for many, many years, and have experienced a lot of health consequences and symptoms from it. And so the reason why I'm also making, a very contrary message is because that is something that at scale is harmful to people because you have people, going in one direction, following health trends and taking all this advice that's not actually based on science nutritionally that says that that's best for what humans eat. It's more just, like what is creatively feels good and kind of fuels our enthusiasm to really jump in and take control of our health, which is great. But then it's exploited, and the commercializing food industry, if you really dig down into who owns organic, it's a pretty shocking study. That's like that's a whole other course. But we can't just Google, like, do almonds have cyanide in them, or is kale harmful, or is spinach gonna harm me, or whatever, because there's so much information that is out there to kind of stack the deck against facts, that these 7 sources are just, what I use to kind of eliminate confusion. So anyway, all that to say, we need a more nuanced approach to finding answers if truth is what you seek. So we're up against trillion-dollar industries, so don't ever forget that. And so source number 2 is Sally K. Norton. And she just came out with this book called Toxic Superfoods, and few foods trend harder than foods that get the label superfoods. So that's why, she called it that. And it's interesting about oxalate overload and how many symptoms and health problems are caused by it, that there is zero conscious connection in the medical field with, beyond that spinach in excess may be contributing to some people's kidney stones. But she also has a very contrary message. So she has this book out. She also has this, beginner's guide. If you're interested in, like, well, what foods are really high in oxalate? What is oxalate? How could it be, impacting my symptoms? So for example, I was cooking every single meal and snack from scratch. I was like eating as organic and clean as I possibly could, vegan, like the whole thing. And I had a lot of pain, like looking back. I had a lot of other different symptoms and things, but I had a lot of pain that when I look back, I'm like, oh, it was from the oxalate overload. And so I just find it really fascinating. So wanted to really highlight her and, lift her voice up, because she has a contrary message. And it's also one that, because our internal organs are so finely and delicately made, like we can withstand a lot, but then there's also, you can't replace certain parts of you as much as, like, we've become accustomed, like, oh, your knee's bad, just get a new one. You need a hip replacement, like, it gets much more serious when we're talking about kidneys and, really fine, delicate, sensitive internal organs that are essential to health and wellness and enjoying your life. So highly recommend becoming familiar with Sally K. Norton. And she's easier to find than ever because she has her new book out. But this beginner's guide is on her website. I think it's like $250. She has tons of interviews, podcasts, all kind of things. Really easy to get the lowdown. And she gives solutions, right? She's very solution oriented because her focus is in how to get better. So check it out. She spent years on this because she recovered her own health. And so for me, those are always great sources of information, because this is not just pontification. This is people like who've been through hell and back and want to warn people that, hey, there's a lion on that path that is, going to ravage you. And so watch out. And so something as simple as overconsumption of chia seeds and almonds and sweet potatoes and chocolate and spinach, I mean, it's just food. How could it be doing that? But it's pretty fascinating science. So check it out. Source number 3, environmental working group. So this is probably, of all the tools that I share, this is one that is widely known. The Dirty Dozen comes out every single year. This is the environmental working group shopping the produce section, and then they test. So the Dirty Dozen is the most contaminated fruits and vegetables of 2023. And this is not just like dirty from the field. This is washed, peeled, prepared for eating, and then they test them. So here we go. Very popular foods for children, trending foods all in the Dirty Dozen. And then we have the Clean 15, which is their recommendations. Like if you're not able to just buy everything across the board organic because it's not available or it's not in your budget, they say, you know, these are the safer foods to buy non-organic. And so it comes out every single year. And this is one of it. They also have other things on their website. And source number 4 brings us to the Cornucopia Institute. So they have these really helpful scorecards. And so they have organic eggs, organic dairy, organic beef. And if that's not your thing, they have a guide to organic, avoiding carrageenan in organic foods, yogurt, plant-based beverages. You know, they've really done a great job. And just an example of how it works. So say you wanted to know about the organic eggs that you were sourcing. You can go in and they have the farms listed by name. And obviously, like my farm would never be on this. Not every farm is, but you know, farms that are more widely available to a broad spectrum of the American consumer, if they wanted to be rated, they could be. So here is 5 eggs. So that's like 5-star rating. So it tells you, you know, the farm, you click on it and it tells you more about the farm. It links to their website, tells you a little bit about what they offer. Conversely, if you wanted to find the what's going on with the 1-star, 1-egg review, you know, like the Whole Foods ones, Sprouts, Organic, Trader Joe's, all of the, I think just below this is the Aldi's brand. It tells you that they don't have points, right? So they couldn't be bothered, even though Cornucopia Institute is a really trusted source among savvy consumers. They couldn't be bothered to answer any of their questions. So it's basically just across the board because they didn't want to engage. Perhaps they could change their rating if they bothered, but they're not answering questions. All right. So source number 5. So this is a little bit of an unusual food source. It's Lead Safe Mama, Tamara Rubin. She is a mother of 4 sons, 3 of whom got lead poisoning during a renovation job that a contractor was doing. And so obviously that type of injury has really dominated their family life experience. And so she's on a mission to prevent other families from having such a devastating consequence as lead poisoning. And so typically we think of, you know, lead poisoning like that in lead paint construction in homes. So she has all manner of resources, and she uses this little gun thing here that is a very expensive piece of equipment, very, you know, hard to come by and specific for what she does, and quite expensive. And so she tests everything, like everything from the little people that, you know, many of us in the 80s like grew up playing with, the Fisher Price people. She tests them. She tests you know, like Legos, books, toys, talks about blood tests, fish, things in the kitchen, pretty much, you know, like everything that she in her life can carve out time to do this work about lead education. She's open. She's open to doing that. So she has this one really devastating post about how much lead is in my salt. She's known for, you know, really breaking the story about lead contamination in chocolate. And she's just, you know, a really excellent resource. She's known for, you know, making women cry and throw out their heirlooms because, like, you know, from our family china that we have to like toys that we may have saved for our children or whatever. It's just like a very sad state of affairs where the commercial interests, you know, put things out into the marketplace that are not even, you know, safe to be eaten off, much less consumed. So she's a great source of information. And then getting towards the end of our list here, Dr. Max Malnardi of Symptometry. So I first met him on a radio program that was called The Ultimate Healthcare that nobody's ever heard of. And so I was like, I pulled up like, what? What could he be talking about? What is it? So on this radio program, he was talking about how the navy bean is the best bean, and I thought, okay, so he was making connections between what we consume on a daily basis in the way that I had, made that connection before, but then he was going really deep and he was talking about the chemical compounds that naturally occur in plants. So this was like a decade before I heard of Sally K. Norton, or really, I had started to understand the significance of the Weston A. Price Foundation and the resources that they bring. But what I most recognized from his presentation was How to Eat to Live. I was like, oh, he's actually highlighting a lot of the foods that are, you know, recommended in How to Eat to Live, and he's really down on the foods that we are told to stay away from. So I thought, okay, um, but he was really the first person that broke down what we are facing at scale with these health trends. And so he explained that he calls it what to consume. So he is it turns out he's a homeopath, right? So with his health clients that he calls subjects, like his health subjects, he it became a special interest of his, of those 20% of people that don't heal, right? Most healers or doctors, or people that see clients, have a success rate, and then they have that portion of their client base that they can't shift their symptoms or make any impact on whatsoever. And so he's a clinician who is with people fighting to recover their health, and he's very interested in how to have a greater level of success with these people. And so this was a call-in program. It was Root Cause Radio. Eventually became out of it, but he was a guest on someone else's show. He was on Coach Kair's show, and they were just talking. So I called in because I had those. I thought I was doing everything well with the plant-based eating, being really ahead of the curve. I've been doing this since 1992, doing all the things. Like, what was going on with these different things that we were facing? So I called him up, and I have the recording of it still. It was very fascinating how he just like tuned right in on me. And based on what I asked him, he asked me some questions, and then he knew all these things about us and was able to give me answers that nobody else had ever put together. So I was instantly like, huh, what's going on? So, like I said, it turns out he's a homeopath, but he kept studying beyond homeopathy, and he took this idea of regimen that is very present in homeopathy, meaning like how we live is a serious factor in how we heal and how we enjoy health, right? Like, lifestyle really does matter. It mattered 200 years ago when homeopathy was emerging. And so, anyway, Dr. Nardi, he's a brilliant man. And what's noteworthy about his story is how he came upon the work that he does, right? So he was sick. He was beyond sick. Like, he was dismissed to die by all the doctors in the 90s. But his wife was determined to find answers and to help him recover. She was not allowing the passing of her husband without, turning over every stone and really looking for answers. So it was this harrowing life journey that really caused him to see what he calls the downside of nutrition. So he created his own system, by blending everything he had experienced and knew from, like his health studies and homeopathy, and the food science laboratory. So that was really his big thing with what to consume and trying to figure out, why don't 20% of people heal? Why aren't people getting better results? And so his book, What to Consume, is a guidebook for, for his client. And his system is called Symptometry Root Cause Therapeutics. And so this was the major thing that I learned from him. And I was not aware of this, and maybe you're not aware of this, is that there are these tremendous gaps in the approach that this world takes to nutritional science. And currently the focus, it's like super narrow, right? It only looks for known nutrients that the establishment has deemed important, right? Like, this is food is high in calcium. And so there is no other focus on what else might be contained in that plant or that food. It's just completely off the table. It's just, oh, it's high in calcium, or it's high in vitamin C, it's high in iron, it's high in protein, etc. Like, super narrow focus, and everything else is a blur. Like, it doesn't matter. And that's where the danger of these health trends and the commercializing interest. We have delicate bodies, and we can't just be out here, like overloading it with all these things from bad information. And so, he's really dedicated to raising the discussion around the downside of nutrition. What else might these foods, plants, fruits, vegetables, grains, fish, everything, like, what else might it contain? And what could we do, instead? And so, it's really erroneously assumed that all plant foods are healthy for all people. And so that brings us to source number 7. So, How to Eat to Live by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And if you're still here with me, facing this huge issue of like, what's the best diet to eat, I invite you to join me on this journey towards understanding and applying How to Eat to Live as taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, while using these other sources and kind of knit together, a framework that you can just like really quickly put things, a filter, if you will. You can just like any image, you can just mentally be like, oh, okay, yeah, no, and this is why, kind of thing. So this segment might not mean much to you, if you're not a believer, if you're not a follower of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and I totally understand. You don't have to be in alignment with it for the rest of what I'm going to say to mean something to you. However, I'm adding this because it's essential for me to give credit where credit is due. Dr. Nardi, who I mentioned, he did, because when I said, your work is reminding me of How to Eat to Live. And he said, absolutely. I brought that book into the laboratory with me. Like, I studied everything that was recommended in that book. He said it on the radio program. He said it in his classes. He gave credit where credit is due. So it's very important that I give credit where credit is due. And this course would not have been created without this foundation. And on that note, I actually, just to mention, like, I do receive DMs asking me, like, do you truly feel that the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad are for everyone, that they apply to everyone and not just Black people? And my honest response is yes. Like, I truly do believe that they are a universal teaching for all of humanity. And while this class is about food and it's not about the teachings, I bear witness. And so it's like full disclosure, no surprises later. I've wasted years not being myself. And so I'm just, saying it from the gate, weaving it into all that I do, because I do believe that life is to be lived. And I've done it for long enough of not just putting it all out there. So back in the day when this book was published, his recommendation was do not eat the vegetable called kale. And I thought, in the 1990s, late 1990s, when I first read this, I thought, really? Because kale is like the holy grail of macrobiotic cooking, and it was just starting to be a trend. And so I thought, okay, I don't know why that is. And then when I met Dr. Maxwell Nardi, and he explained about how you can't just look at a plant and say, oh, it's high in, this mineral and this nutrient and that nutrient. You have to look at what else is bound up within the natural defense mechanism of the plant itself. I thought, oh, okay, I've actually eaten a lot of kale and caused a lot of these symptoms and health problems. But I was so grateful to understand why it was just a flat recommendation. Do not eat the vegetable called kale, right? Don't eat it. And so anyway, let me just make sure that I'm staying on track here. So there's also really clear recommendations for, do this, right? Cauliflower is a really fine vegetable. Well, but take away the green leaves. It's a very interesting recommendation. So bringing back source number two, Sally K. Norton, cauliflower is very low oxalate, kale, very high. So, you can see how science is really catching up to these very simple recommendations from ages ago, but better late than never. It was also a very, very clear instruction: do not eat nuts of any kind. Do not eat nuts of any kind. And Dr. Nardi was very adamant about that for many reasons, but do not eat nuts of any kind. And so, however you want to look at that, it's pretty clear: do not eat nuts of any kind. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's very interesting to just see how these different foods, soy and nuts and sweet potato and kale and don't be a habitual spinach eater, all these recommendations of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, how, science is catching up. And now we can go over it. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was also an early voice for local agriculture. He was really, speaking about that very consistently for the whole of, the publications. It's like from the beginning up until present day. It's a very strong voice for agriculture to be the foundation. And so just with so much confusion, so this is the reason why I made this class. There's just so much confusion on the landscape of like food and diet and agriculture. And he consistently taught this really simple blueprint for what is basically a closed looped farm as a strong economic force. And so if you're not familiar with that term, a closed loop farm is just basically like where the farm is growing and producing much of what it needs to drive fertility and also economic profitability. So within the pages of How to Eat to Live, there is a blueprint explaining that, if understood, because when you piece together all the different recommendations of like, how are we going to accomplish that? How does one achieve that? Then you see, what isn't written and like get to read between the lines. So if you make a food list and study carefully the foods that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad cautions against, discourages, or flatly admonishes his followers not to eat, and then put those in an outline and hit up those other like 6 sources of information that I shared, a really interesting pattern emerges. And I've been fascinated to see this data from uncommon nutritional science and best farming practices blend together and illustrate just how precise his recommendations were. So lining it all up really eliminates dietary confusion for me. I'm like, oh, okay. So it's taken me years to put together this really simple system that I just shared. And it's how I now decide if a popular food that's widely available is a health trend or if it's a dead end. And if you want to learn more, go deeper, food by food, like do a food by food study, a trend by trend review, create those outlines that I was talking about, and learn how to sidestep some of these expensive dead ends, like especially the ones that are going to be damaging our body in the process, protect your kidneys, reduce that inflammation, and how to stock up your kitchen with foods that preserve life, and in general, just like get your questions answered. I invite you to enroll in my upcoming healthy trend or dead end solutions class. So we're going to go in depth, and you can just hit the link below for more details. And I hope what I shared is helpful and blesses you to make good decisions and to sidestep a lot of this honestly marketing driven food trend propaganda. I know it can be overwhelming, but I hope to see you on the other side, because I really spent a lot of time thinking about all these different topics and issues. And I think that there's much that we can do while arming ourselves with solid sources of information. All right, peace.